Good morning, everyone. It's good to be back with you. We've had a crazy time around here, but it's good to be back. This morning's topic, oxidative stress in children, may be one of the most important things that I've taught in these years we've been having Wednesday Wellness. And I want to thank those of you who filled in during my absence. I always feel like that the listeners gain so much more from you than they do from me. So thank you. The reason I say that this may be one of the most important or the most important Wednesday Wellness we've had is because we are at a time in history. We're at a time in history when we have a group of individuals at such great risk that we have to change things now. So I am excited when I hear that some of the dyes they're going to have to be taken off the market. I'm like, yes. And I hope there's going to be more of that to come because um, when I do finish my book on ADD, ADHD, and autism, I'm going to show you some of the proof that we've had for many, many years about the dangers of so many things. But to my way of thinking, after this many years of research, and most of you know that I'm 82, I have been researching this particular field for almost 60 years now. And so if people ask me, Jackie, what do you think is the number one cause for all of these children things we're having? And all of these children things we're having are affecting a population because many parents are thinking, I don't want to try to have children because I could have an autistic child or I could have this terror child like my friends have. So it's a much bigger picture than we sometimes think about. So, with people who have children, people who want to have children, and grandparents, I want you to listen carefully because I'm going to go back and sort of put some of the pieces of a puzzle together. And I'm going to look at the big picture because that's where I think we have to start. I'm going to share, hopefully, one piece of research with you this morning that I felt was important. If I can, okay, here we go. Carol, are you seeing this, my dear?
Yes, free radicals and antioxidants.
And the rest of it says in the year 2000. Wow. Then what do you think? Why do you think I decided to go back as far as I could in PubMed.gov and try to do an overview? Now, what this says, and this is important for us to know as a people group, because we have been dependent for so many years just on what the medical community told us. And the medical community could tell us only what was in their boundaries. So you have the radical, or you have the aberrant, or the maverick doctor or researcher who began to say, wait a minute, uh, let's look at this a different way. And this is pretty much what we're seeing here. Um, in the late 1950s, free radicals and antioxidants were almost heard of where? In the clinical and biological sciences. And that's very important because those are the fields of science that are usually speaking to us about our bodies. But chemists had known about them for years in the context of what? Radiation, polymer, and combustion technology. So they go on, and here they go on and mention the first scientists that began to talk about toxic effects of elevated oxygen levels on Arabs at AER. I don't know how to pronounce that word. I've forgotten. Of those of ionizing radiation and proposed that oxygen toxicity is due to free radical formation. So when you start reading through this, you're going to run into a bunch of stuff. But this is an important sentence. It says, thus, superoxide dismutase, SOD, were quickly identified. I would have to question that because it wasn't until 1969 that Joe McCord, a young grad student, Duke University, discovered the role of an enzyme in the body that he and his colleague named superoxide dismutase. So until that length of time, all they knew was cells talk to each other. There is this presence of oxygen toxicity in the body, and they had been able to identify that electrons, they've known, I guess, in chemistry, who knows how long, that electrons had to be paired. Then if you lost an electron or gained an electron, you had an abnormal molecule, an abnormal atom or molecule. And that those abnormal molecules, for example, try to stabilize. You've heard me teach before about homeostasis in the body. So here, what we have here is the body trying to balance itself. Just a complete balancing act of trying to be okay. However, every time they steal or lend an electron, more molecules became unstable. 1969, they'd been studying enzymes. They discovered enzymes in the body. They just simply, what do they do in the body? And that's when Dr. McCord discovered that this one little enzyme had the amazing job of eliminating free radicals. In fact, a molecule of the SOD, the superoxide dismutase, that the body makes is capable of eliminating 1 million free radicals every second, 24 hours a day. So, what could go wrong? So, you would think then that we had a perfect balance system in the body, and we do. However, those of you who've listened to this for a long time, you know we decline in the production of antioxidant enzymes 10% every decade. So, what about children? Now, if you've ever listened to the ABC investigative report, where John Quinones is talking about how a very powerful new product, which we called at the time Protandim, we usually refer to it as NRF2 now, was in a blood test, was able to drop oxidative stress, which is the imbalance between the free radicals the body's making and the body's answer to these free radicals. That imbalance is what is oxidative stress. Was able to drop the free radicals by an average of 40% in 30 days, average 70% in 120 days. If you've watched that video, you will remember that they refer about dropping his free radicals back to the level of a child or an infant. Now, what does that preclude? That precludes that children have very, very low levels of free radicals. In fact, what babies and children should have is only the free radicals produced by metabolism. But if they run into some oxidative stress, they have a self-regulating amount of these antioxidant enzymes that their body makes to counteract them. However, by the mid-80s, blood tests, because by the mid-80s, we were, when I say we, it's not Jackie Sheppard, but it was scientists, clinicians in the field. They were trying to do metabolic testing, blood tests, saliva tests, urine tests, any kind of test they could do to find out what we called what's wrong with these kids. And they were finding very, very high levels of oxidative stress. So when you look at a big picture this morning, I want you to look at an emergence of increasing oxidative stress among America's children. And we have to include global, except in various pockets of the world where people have lived pretty much like their ancestors, or in the Amish and Mennonite communities. Um, they tend to have had less oxidative stress in their children. So if you're looking at the big picture oxidative stress, you have to go back. What came first, the chicken or the egg? And for many years, they thought that ADD, ADHD, autism was causing oxidative stress. They thought that heart problems, cancer, all of these things, high blood pressure, were causing oxidative stress. I could not find the exact time that this thinking began to shift. However, there are scientists who back in the 50s were saying oxidative stress, this accumulation of free radicals that's beyond what the body can handle, is the cause of disease. Now, even with those of us who are not scientists, that makes good sense, doesn't it? When the body encounters things that it cannot deal with, it's not that the body ignores it. The body does not ignore the highly toxic food that's being fed to these children. The body does not ignore the highly toxic bottles of baby food that are full of herbicides and pesticides, and by now, GMOs. The body does not ignore it. It tries to counteract it. But the role of oxidative stress in children doesn't just start with birth. In fact, I I am more concerned right now in how fast could we stop oxidative stress prenatal in the womb? How fast can we stop that? And the time has to be now. We have to stop it now. And all of you who have any information and you care, send this little video out to pregnant women because right now they can start lowering the oxidative stress. Now, one of the interesting things is that uh, birth defects, especially Down syndrome, tend to happen more often in older mothers. Well, who has higher oxidative stress? A 20-year-old giving birth or a 40-year-old giving birth? The natural processes of the drop in antioxidant enzymes would would explain, oh, well, an older mother probably has more oxidative stress. But that may or may not be true because if the 20-year-old has been eating toxic processed food, if she's using drugs, if the husband's been using drugs or alcohol or abusing their bodies, even with electromagnetic fields, which name a person that age that is not abusing their bodies with electromagnetic fields. Actually, name someone 40 who's not abusing their body with electromagnetic fields with their cell phones. I was recently making some flights and waiting in airports. I observed that everybody I saw had their head in their phone. And when they got on the plane, they put on their earphones and began again to watch movies. The complete isolation. The children had their own little iPads, or some of them had a separate phone from their parent. So name me one that's not overexposed to electromagnetic fields. What is this doing in the body of a pregnant woman? It is increasing her oxidative stress. Now, I told you that superoxide dismutase has the amazing ability, one molecule, to eliminate 1 million free radicals every second, 24 hours a day. So, where does this come from? Well, chromosome 21, which is associated with Down syndrome, also makes and regulates superoxide dismutase in the body. And where? It's in the tongue. So I am greatly, greatly concerned that high oxidative stress in the mother, the baby is in this protected environment, except it is being fed by the mother. And if the mother has alcohol, it will affect that baby in the womb. So, whatever is causing higher oxidative stress in the mother can potentially be expressed by the baby trying the auto system trying to protect that baby from high oxidative stress by causing the baby's body to make more SOD. The only time you can make too much SOD is in the womb. So it would seem to me, and those of you who know obstetricians, it's a simple thing to test oxidative stress every time a pregnant woman walks through the door. Test her oxidative stress. Tell them I said so. And then we can start working on changing those levels of oxidative stress in that baby. You see, what they began to find out in the mid-80s was that children with ADD, ADHD, autism, and any childhood defect had higher oxidative stress than a normal child. Now, when you start, and I did this week, I started looking for trying to find out about oxidative stress in children. And so much has changed in these years. It's changed since 1990 when I first got a computer, and when I was able to get into scientific papers. Um, what has changed is that now the scientific papers I was running across were indicating that children have high oxidative stress. Children have um, high levels of oxidative stress, and they were acting like it was normal. It's not. A child has a self-regulating amount of antioxidant enzymes, such as glutathione, such as catalase, such as SOD. But if their little bodies are overwhelmed with those things that cause oxidative stress, they begin to do the same thing as an older person. They cannot make enough of these antioxidant enzymes. So the thinking was back in the 80s was okay, high oxidative stress, or maybe the 70s by then, high oxidative stress needs what? High oxidative stress needs an antioxidant stress, which we began, of course, calling antioxidants. And the shelves, the news, everything was flooded with this new commodity, making antioxidants for sale. Now, what wasn't included in a lot of that information is, we can't actually see in a blood test that these antioxidants, it doesn't matter if it's a room full of fruits and vegetables and all sorts of exotic juices and all, it doesn't matter if it's a room full. It is not lowering it in a blood test. And that's why we expected to see a drop in children's disorders, not just ADD, ADHD, and autism, but so many of the other disorders that accompany oxidative stress in children. We expected to see those children get better. They might have gotten a little bit better, but not enough. So it was a pretty much a closed door for us. So the body tries, and you can see this later in this article, it tries to maintain what is called the redox balance. So an expression here you will notice of overexpressing antioxidants show some abnormalities of function. I just told you about what the overexpression of SOD could do. They mention that going forward, they're looking at this from 2000 forward, that's 25 years ago. The challenge for the new century is to be able to understand these relationships. What relationships? Relationship between increasing oxidative stress in individuals, but especially in children, because that's what and if I could have found a graph, but I couldn't find one that shows how has oxidative stress increased through the years just from the normal function of metabolism, which we would call aging, compared to how much oxidative stress is now seen in adults, cumulative, and how much do we now see in children, and cumulative. Let's say that the chart showed it over 20 years. I believe that the highest increase is going to be among children. Because what have we seen? We have seen the emergence of these disorders. And I can tell you that when we first started getting the labels and people were like, oh, we have to get them labeled, have to get them labeled, my position was, how will a label change it? How will a label change it? Let's look for the cause. And that's been the horse I've been riding for so many years. Um, and where we are now is we've got the best chance we've had um, to get the information out there that high oxidative stress is behind all of these children's disorders. And what about disease? Well, part of my research, and I chose to not pull up a lot of papers because I know some of you, you're going to be digging in and finding it out yourself. And when it says here, the challenge for the new century, that includes all of you, is to be able to understand these relationships and look at this, how to manipulate them to our advantage to prevent and treat disease. And that's what we're about. We call this field epigenetics. So in the field of epigenetics for children, we have to start with lowering oxidative stress in them. That's going to be eliminating a lot of the causes. It's going to be hard in our fast food generation. I do the same thing that most of you do. I'm going somewhere, I'm in a hurry. If I don't have to make dinner at the house, I'll just grab whatever's out there. Is that good for an aging body? Absolutely not. Uh, I try to do completely organic here as much as possible. But when I'm out, I'm eating whatever. Does that decrease oxidative stress in my body or does it increase it? It increases it. The other thing is not just the toxic foods these children are being fed. And it's not just the EMFs they're being exposed to, but the EMFs they're being exposed to start in the womb. If you've read my book, Silent Takeover, you know that a woman, they can measure that if she's walking in front of the TV, those rays, and as well as a microwave, goes right into the womb. Don't be dumb enough to think that this does not affect a developing fetus. And then we're putting all sorts of other medical tests, which increases oxidative stress in these children. So how do you turn the world around? You're going to have to start one child at a time. And yet what I'm seeing, sadly, I'm talking to mothers who started maybe 15, 20 years ago, trying to feed their children all organic, trying not to vaccinate, trying to protect their children from electromagnetic fields. And what they have grown is a child who is afraid of almost everything. Actually don't know how and afraid, how do I live a normal life? This should not have happened in our country, guys. And with as much information as there is out there about high oxidative stress in children, what causes it, as well as the being able to really get the information out as to how we can change it. That needs to be paramount in our society right now. It doesn't need to wait to 2026 because every pregnant woman you know, regardless of what's been in uh, her husband's line that has come to her in the sperm, right now she's growing a new baby. And this year in our field, we've had 5 little baby kids born. 3 of them died, and 1 is not well. So I have to look at what happened this year. Was it a lack of minerals? What happened? Because there's a reason. The reason for ADD, ADHD, autism, and so many of the childhood diseases is high oxidative stress, and you can quote me on it. But what about bacterial diseases? Well, stunted, well, let me put it this way, a lack of nutrition, and this doesn't have to be in Biafra, doesn't have to be in a war-torn country, but a lack of nutrition will not only cause high oxidative stress, but it will also cause stunted growth. So, in generations where their parents had more good food, the children have grown bigger and taller and stronger because the way the earth and the people work together. If there's more food, we can grow a bigger individual. What's happening now is that if I were to sit in any, let's say I'm sitting in a movie theater, I don't go often, and after the bad fall I took a few weeks ago and don't know when I'll be back, if ever, taking my 14-year-old to see a movie and took a bad fall, but the children there, just watching them for the brief time we were there that night, they're so disturbed. You see it. If you're around any group of children and you knew children 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 10 years ago, we have so many disturbed children. I surmise that it's not just a change in culture, but it is the high, high level that these children have due to oxidative stress. So, can we eliminate every herbicide, pesticide? Well, we're having a big fight right now in Missouri. Big billboards up supporting glyphosate. Um, and a lot of times, people, when you start explaining the science, this is what they do. They don't want to hear it. What can you do? You can begin by helping every pregnant woman you know have more education on what causes oxidative stress. It's not just herbicides, pesticides. One of the biggest is air pollution. One of the biggest causes of oxidative stress is air pollution. Well, air pollution is going to affect a tiny baby or a baby in the womb much more than an old person like me. And that's the biggest reason that oxidative stress is so dangerous in the newborn, in babies, and in children, is because their bodies cannot handle the onslaught of oxidative stress. It cannot handle the onslaught of those things that cause oxidative stress. So, air pollution, herbicides, pesticides, toxic foods, EMF, and all sorts of toxic chemicals. Some of the ones some of you will remember when BPA in the plastic bottles was outlawed. We were having to read the numbers on the plastic bottles. However, none of the plastic bottles were safe. And then when they changed it to what BPS or BSP, Everybody was like, oh, we can relax. And no, it was just as bad. So when flame retardant pajamas came out, I had little ones and I was thrilled. We had flame retardant pajamas. However, those chemicals were so dangerous. They were changing the endocrine system in the body. If you are a newcomer on this and you haven't read my book, Silent Takeover, I think it's chapter 8 that deals with how these chemicals change the change sexual orientation. And so therefore, when we take all of these problems that we're having with our nation's children and with children around the world, we've got to put at the top. How are we going to change it? We have to eliminate nationally everything that contributes to oxidative stress. And that's going to be a very long list. The compliance to this is going to be painful because it will mean we have to change a lot of what we're doing. However, I have hope that we can begin through education and through people not just closing out science, but looking at it. There's so much science out there that and there's no way for any of us to learn it all. But the science behind high oxidative stress in children is staggering. And if you're on this program this morning, as we move to discussion, Carol, and we can just leave the video, we can leave sound on this morning, the recording on, because I think we'll have some things to share. If you're on this small group this morning, I want you to know that at age 82, I am hopeful that we're going to see an emerging generation of children who are healthy and well, but we have to eliminate the cause of the not just the mental, emotional, addictive disorders, but the cause behind the physical disorders. So, Carol, let's go to questions and answers. Okay, what do you all want to add this morning? Light bulb. Exactly.
It was kind of like when I discovered that animals, dogs in particular, don't live as long because they have higher oxidative stress.
Right.
Oh, it was a light bulb moment.
Yeah.
Here's my question, because I know that autism, ADHD, ADD, all those things, parents that have children that have that diagnosis, I have found that those parents, it's a very touchy subject because as a parent, I understand you love your child for who they are and you think they're perfect the way they get that God made them. My question is how to approach a parent, I mean, obviously in love, with the idea that maybe we can change some things to bring out your child's full potential without being negative or critical of their diagnosis.
Well, let me go back to this. When parents begin to suspect something's wrong with their child, they go to the pediatrician. Now, if the pediatrician's education has said there is nothing we can do on autism, for example, the, they began then to switch to the other way of thinking of acceptance of your child. Now, to me, this is this is not good. I'm like, let's continue looking under every rock to find out what can be done, what can do. And especially then, if you have to go beyond the medical world and you begin to look in the natural world, and then again, quite often the parents go back and talk to their pediatrician. Some of you know Dr. Neil Goodman. You know Dr. Neil Goodman? Renee, I know you know him.
Oh, yeah, very well.
Yeah. And once he began to find out, wait a minute, we can change some of these things, he was actually dismissed from his pediatric practice. Isn't that correct?
Yeah, he was the head of pediatrics for an entire medical system in southern Georgia that included Brunswick and up to Savannah, Brunswick, the Golden Isles, and that it was a medical system with air, and he was over pediatrics for the entire system. And his change of stance on this topic cost him that career. He's in private practice now, but nothing like what he had before.
Sure. So, Carol, you know that I'm a woman of faith. So I have to go back to the diabolical. This is like a web that has been spun over the minds, especially parents. But I would have to say this is what they're taught in med school. When I started talking about free radicals and oxidative stress so many years ago, if I was talking to a doctor and I said, Doctor, have you heard of free radicals? They would say no. And they were usually curious, amused sometimes, but curious, because remember, I started talking free radicals in the early 1980s when Dr. Murray, a research pediatrician, taught me about them. And recently, oh, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was talking to a young student here in Missouri, and I said, Have you heard of free radicals? He looked at me and he said, Of course. Now that's the shift. And I said, Have you heard of oxidative stress? Now, through the years, the doctors either said no or they said, I've heard of them, but I don't know what they are. So, if you have not been taught that free radicals are the cause of disease and that it is imperative that we lower free radicals, you're dealing with strictly how to treat symptoms. And this has been so true with children. What can we do? And guys, if I'm stepping on toes here, let me step on them. I have been in education for all these years. Do you know what the parents were mainly concerned about? Child was failing, child was making bad grades, child would not behave in the classroom. So they were only too thankful to get a medicine. So, however, who knew at the time that those kids were not going to be able to learn the information that it would actually hinder that brain development? We didn't know. But we know a lot more now than we know, and therefore we've got to do something about it. Approaching people, and Carol, I know this firsthand, approaching people to say, hey, maybe you got to fish on the other side of the boat. Maybe you got to cross the street. Maybe you've got to recognize there are children whose ADD, ADHD is being eliminated. Maybe, parent, you need to be open to the fact that people with children with autism are getting better. Now, we've got amazing schools of thought out there now, neuroplasticity. We've got all sorts of places that can help the brain make up for the lack of development, because that's what it's doing. All of these things are making up for the lack of development that was not possible. And I think a lot of the reason it wasn't possible, one big thing, EMFs, but secondly, the high oxidative stress, which EMFs helped cause. Renee?
This reminds me what Carol's talking about with parents accepting their children. When my husband was diagnosed with early onset dementia back, it's been 13 years now, with no signs today of said disease. But I joined the Alzheimer's Association and actually sat on the Georgia State Board of the Alzheimer's Association. And I was there at a time when the shift began to change from care for that person to care for the caregiver. And what I've been seeing from the Alzheimer's Association is not all that different from what Carol's talking about. Accept them, accept what's going on. Don't try to change them. It's natural. To change them is a bad thing. They're actually being taught on every level, both ends, pediatrics to geriatrics, that this is a natural thing that your loved one, your child, or your spouse or your parent is going through, and we just need to help you better cope with what their diagnosis is. I don't know about little kids, but like with my husband, to remove him from the cattle, to call him out, was to not give him Alzheimer's drugs, was to not follow the path, was not to beat the drum with everyone else. And when I actually went into a meeting and said, my husband is better, they were literally, I got called out, removed from the meeting of the board of directors of the Alzheimer's Association of Georgia. So I do understand what these parents are being taught. And the other thing that I wanted to get to, I was on a college campus Friday night. My little college campus, Valdosta State University, something called Mayhem, because it's the first Friday in May. And they have fun things on the lawn. They always have. There's music, there's some entertainers. And I was watching these kids. I was telling Doug, I'm like, something's just, I don't know. The girls were only interested relationship wise with girls, and the boys were only hanging out with boys. I'm not talking about like your buddies. You know what I'm saying? It was pretty much, there's a lot more sexuality in it. And I was watching the music and watching the kids. And the last act of the night was the music kind of changed from fun stuff to this hard beating sound that was under I couldn't even really understand the music for the most part, but it just drew these young people. Like, they were all over the front lawn, and then all of a sudden it was like a magnet. Something in that just drew them. And where they had been enjoying the music, it was almost like they were, I don't want to say hypnotized, but they were not happy. They were doing movements that their mama wouldn't have wanted them to do. Like, she would have gone, I hope, and said, I'm paying for this education, what you're doing right now. And it was, I don't want to say orgy, but it was almost that type of environment, very satanic. Even though the lyrics weren't horrid, there was something in that primal beat that all of these young people, I was away from it. I mean, I was right there with that. And I'm like, I'm not drawn to it, but there's something in it, something otherworldly that is drawing our kids. And I'm just wondering if there's something in their music now that's also connecting with that space in their head where it's a bigger picture than we even think. Because I'm sure most of those people would have been diagnosed with something. They weren't normal. What I would compared to my kids, these kids were not normal kids to begin with.
Well, I do touch on this briefly in Silent Takeover, Renee. So go back and read, because I talk about the frequencies.
Yes, but it seems like that these kids that are more prone, that have been brought up with
They
are just so much more susceptible to that tone or that rhythm or that frequency.
You know your brain well enough to know that sometimes the first chord of music, you know where the song's going. You also know it will actually take you back down memory lane, whether you want to go down memory lane or not. The very first chord of music. that you're familiar with. There are certain chords that connect with the body. In Silent Takeover, I talk about the Native Americans' warpath songs. They had to get them up to a certain place. Germany, some of you know that Hitler was doing huge research on this. He wanted marching songs, conquering songs. So through history we have seen it, but now we can watch the science of it. And you're exactly right. The people who now with the computers that can create certain sounds know what they're doing to the bodies. Now, I remember well when Elvis Presley came on the scene. And some of my girlfriends suddenly became people I didn't know when his music came on. I was like, what's wrong with them? It did not affect me, but it did affect them. And do you know, and this is girl talk this morning, they would explain when I was like, guys, they felt it in their abdomen.
Yep. That's what was going on the front lawn of my little university.
And it's intentional.
It was a scene right out of some, I can't even, it was like soft porn, what was going on.
And it was. It was affecting hormones. It was affecting feelings in their bodies. And you remember the story of the Pied Piper.
Yes, that's kind of where I was kind of going with that. It's like,
Yeah.
what are they being pulled to?
Yeah,
They're being pulled away from us, that's for sure.
that's true. And that alienation from parents is intentional. It's intentional. Other comments this morning? Pitch in here. I know some of you have some thoughts.
I'll just mention real quick while everybody's thinking about their wisdom to share. When Renee, when you were talking about the Alzheimer's, I am very close to someone in my family that when my mom was going through Alzheimer's, called it beautiful, a beautiful progression of age.
Yep, there you go.
Drank the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
they're not getting what we know. They don't know. And even when I was talking with my husband's physician, she's part of a group of DOs. They're wonderful, right? And I said, did he mention his dementia? And she said, what dementia? And I said, if you go back right now in our, for some reason in our charts, you can only go back 10 years. So the information that would have led to that diagnosis is not in his chart that the doctors see. And I said, well, just get him to tell you what he's doing for brain function. And when we have these stories, just like my ability to because of the the free radicals being able to, my body being able to see the cancer that I had, I didn't have to have chemo or radiation or major surgery. My body healed, and that was the term my doctor used. But the when that happens and you tell another doctor, they're like, well, that's good for you. You had a miraculous recovery, but they don't see it as even a potential, as something that they can begin to beat the drum in a different direction to say, we can change this. Most of that is because these doctors, their hands are tied. And if you're outside their protocol, good for you, good parent, or good for you, good, for checking it out, or good for you taking care of your loved one. But I can't do anything other than what this system I'm working for tells me I can do. I can't change my, or I could lose my, that's what my own oncologist, oncologist said. She said, I truly believe that what you did saved your life. But if someone were asking for natural options, I couldn't even tell them about you.
Yeah. And of course, we see what happened with Neil.
Right.
Primate.
Exactly. Because he did speak out.
He was
And
like,
so
he's
these
committed to
parents,
healing these children, a pediatrician. And he's like,
exactly,
I'm not going to be quiet. So they're like, then you're out of here.
you're out of it.
As we're calling it to a close today, Carol, I want to go back to your question. As a woman of faith, I would have to say pray for the right time and the right words. And I don't think there's anything wrong with saying this. It's so exciting to know about the new developments and let them ask you.
Okay.
Because it's hard. Because when the pediatrician, the one who's supposed to know the most, says accept it, there's nothing that can be done. And I've heard this said again and again. Pediatrician said stop chasing something, dreams, wishful dreams, and spending all your money. Just live with it, figure it out, how to contain it, basically. Right now, and this is, I'm going to close out with this statement. Every little town, every church needs to establish a means of helping the parents understand how to combat this. And we're going to have centers. Remember, there were places for tuberculosis when it was an epidemic. What we've got is an epidemic of children who are not just missing their full potential, but who are being harmed. Uh, we've got to have residentials where we can, over a period of time, change this because we can. Thank you. Love you all. Um, I'll have to be in touch about next Wednesday, but plan to be here. Okay? Bye.